And I still have on here that
really you'll see it, we shift in the book now, and you'll just see Job, it seems to me at least, in the next several arguments we'll read, he holds to a hope. He doesn't understand anything, but he does hope in God. And so you see him make that decision, and he'll be holding to hope through at least what we're covering tonight. And that'll be all the way to the end of his friends' discourses, and then we'll finish up. There's kind of there's this discourse of Job in the center of the book. It's the final response to all the friends' arguments, but it's a little bit more almost like a purposeful insert into the book, where it is Job making his case about himself, and really it's a little bit more elaborate and poetic than a lot of what we've been reading, because he's not necessarily just responding to his friends, he's elaborating on his understanding of God. So that we'll be looking at that next week. After that, then Elihu makes his discourse with Job, and then we see God make his discourse with Job, and then we see the final outcoming. So that's kind of where we're at in the book, is almost to the center point of at least the form of the book, instead maybe not chapter-wise, but probably chapter-wise too. And then where we're starting tonight, just looking at my notes, we're covering new ground. So what we about 2 years ago, we started the book of Job in March of 2019. We stopped, and it was the chapters we studied last week. So now we're going to move forward, all new material, so if you've been looking forward to that. And last time it took us 8 classes to get here. This time it only took us 5, so we've picked up the pace. So that's probably what I wanted to do, but I just I get to be long-winded. Can someone turn these lights on right above me here? I'm like, why is it so dark up here? Like, so we're missing some lights. All right, so to begin with, so Job makes his answer to Bildad, who's really being harsh with him. Thank you, Roger. Who's really being harsh with him. Zophar makes his final argument, which is his second, but it's not that good. And really, it's not super long, but it's also not really a strong argument. And he basically repeats himself. Zophar, I would say, in my opinion, in my estimation, is the least wise of all the friends. His first discourse was not that good. He's holding to the same thing. Of course, God always brings evil back on people. So I found this picture. I think it pretty much illustrates Zophar's position. You do something wrong, it's going to come back around and get you. And that's kind of his view on things. This is actually what I looked for is about karma. You know how people would talk about karma, and then they had this, and I thought that's perfect. Like, this is exactly what, basically what Zophar believes is, you do something wrong, and it's going to come around and affect you at some point. And that's really, if you want to sum up his argument that we're going to read, this is what we're going to sum up, is basically in this way. So verse 20, or Job 20, verse 1, Zophar the Naamathite answered, "Therefore my disquieting thoughts make me respond, even because of my inward agitation. I listen to the reproof which insults me, and the spirit of my understanding makes me answer." Now I think he's the least wise, but notice how he talks about this. He's insulted and incensed that Job would speak to him in this way, because Job really had a pretty harsh response to him, and has had some harsh responses. And now he's like, now I'm insulted. So he's going to let Job have it. Here's what we're talking about here. He's not the harshest of them. He was initially, but now he's not going to be. But through 4 through 11, he begins his argument with the triumph of the wicked is short. So he says, sure, they're going to look like they're winning, but in the end, they're not going to win. And so he says... Yeah, it's 4 through 11. I was thinking 1 through 5. I was thinking, that doesn't seem right. All right, 4 through 11. Do you not know this from of old, from the establishment of the earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless momentary? Though his loftiness reaches the heavens, and his head touches the clouds, he perishes forever like his refuse. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? He flies away like a dream, and they cannot find him. Even like a vision of the night, he is chased away. The eye which saw him sees him no longer, and his place no longer beholds him. His sons favor the poor, and his hands give back his wealth. His bones are full of youthful vigor, but it lies down with him in the dust. So here is his first argument is, don't you realize this is ancient wisdom? Everybody knows this. That's kind of how he's starting it. Everybody knows this, that no matter how high the wicked get, they will be brought low. So that's his argument. Well, what was Job's trajectory? You know, when he starts saying this, Job was the greatest man of the East. And Zophar is implying that's what happened to you. And so in all of this, that's kind of the thing. That's the last thing you say. It doesn't say it, but basically, and that's what happened to you. So we know you're wrong because that's what happened to you. Starting in verse 12, it says, though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, though he desires it and will not let it go, but holds it in his mouth, yet the food in his stomach is changed to the venom of cobras within him. So yeah, it starts out sweet, but eventually the Lord's going to cause him to vomit it up. And that's really the next thing he kind of goes on and elaborates about how it's going to affect his stomach and how it's going to be rejected from his body, because what he is taking is the poison of snakes. So he kind of goes through an elaboration on that. But really, here's kind of the central element of his point. Yeah, sure, the evil think doing what they do is sweet, but it will be turned to venom for them. In their lifetime is kind of his implication. They will see it turn to venom. And so when you start saying that, Job's question following this is, who are they? Name names. If you know them, Zophar, who are they? And that's a lot harder question to answer. But what Zophar is just implying is this happens to everyone who's evil. I mean, this is just the way it is. Evil men can't stand, and righteous men can't fall. So that's kind of what he's presenting here. Verse 19, it says, for he, now this is, I believe, his implication of Job. For he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has seized the house which he has not built. Because he knew no quiet within him, he does not retain anything he desires. Nothing remains for him to devour. Therefore his prosperity does not endure. In the fullness of his plenty he will be cramped. The hand of everyone who suffers will come against him. When he fills his belly, God will send his fierce anger on him and will rain it on him while he is eating. So here you just see him elaborating on that eating venom thing again. But that's his accusation, and this is repeated about Job, is he oppressed and has oppressed and forsaken the sower and seized houses which don't belong to him. So those are the accusations. Eliphaz will elaborate on that, but that's what Zophar is saying. And it says, nothing will remain for him to devour. Go down to verse 29. Actually, I want to back up. Let me see. Maybe I'll start in verse 27. It says, the heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart. His possessions will flow away in the day of his anger. This is the wicked man's portion from God, even the heritage decreed to him by God. So here's, he says, whatever you gain will be taken away from you, and this is what God has decreed for that person. So now here Zophar strongly affirms that what I'm saying is not just my opinion in the matter. What I am saying is the only way God operates. God has, by his mouth, decreed it, and therefore it will be so. So this is a major, he is asserting something very confidently. And Job is just really going to blow his argument out of the water in just a few sentences. He's not going to say too much. But what Job is going to do is he's really going to dislodge this concept from his friend. Because, and you know, I was thinking about this. This argument sounds nice. And it is something that's nice to believe. Right? Is if I'm a good person, then good is coming to me. You know, and who thinks they're a good guy? Everybody thinks they're a good guy. Right? Even like murderers, they think, hey, I'm not that bad of a guy. Like everybody thinks they're a good guy. So if you say, if you're a good guy, then good will happen to you. Well, hey, I'm a good guy. Hey, everybody likes this message. Then you say the wicked. Well, who's wicked? Well, they're wicked. You know, that guy's wicked and that guy's wicked. Are you wicked? No, I'm a good guy. Right? And this is one of those kind of messages that people like to hear. And it's one of those messages that even today, people like to hear it. But the thing is, something Elihu says is, no, Job says this, and then Elihu confirms it. Your argument contains falsehood. It's lies. It can't be true. And it's disproved by simple reasoning. But there are so many things I think it's easy to accept, or we want to accept. It's framed in an acceptable way. That if you really just spend a little time thinking about it, it's so easy to disprove. Probably a lot of modern religion, not just Christianity, but religion, falls into this category. Where if you critically thought about it, if you analyzed it, saying, does that work? According to this, does that work? The answer is no, it doesn't work. And that's the problem here with Zophar's argument. If you say, does that work? Does it work like that? A few things Job's going to bring up that is really going to dislodge this way of thinking. But really the question is, does that work? And the answer is no, it doesn't work. It can't work that way. And because of that, Zophar is not just wrong, he's ignorant. And really that's where he stands, is he's in his ignorance. I mean, doesn't even have a claim to wisdom, even though a lot of what he says may be some truism to it, but it's not true. It's not truth. You know, truth doesn't change. Truisms can vary a little bit. You know, this is what I tend to see. Okay, that's true. You know, but that doesn't mean it's always true. Truth, what God gives us, is always true. And sometimes it will agree with culture, and sometimes it's going to cross culture, because what God does is unmovable. And people move all over. And so depending on where you are, that truth is going to affect you a different way, depending on where you're starting from. But the truth doesn't move. And so there's two things to realize. Is when you're defining God, there's no, I feel like God is like this. There's none of that. God reveals truth about himself. And if you believe something he didn't say, you're believing a lie. If you believe something he did say, then you're believing the truth. And that's not going to change based on your feelings or emotions or your position or any of that. It won't change. God will stay the same. because God is unchangeable. So that's something to be careful. And what Zophar does is he says, here's who God is, in contradiction of who God is. And Job will get around to that actually in his speeches tonight, which is very interesting how he approaches that. Any thoughts or comments? Joe?
There's the spiritual aspect, I think, of the argument too, that, you know, you see a lot of the physical. These things are happening to you. You must have done something to cause these things to happen. That kind of argument. Job is held to the fact that I've lived righteous before God, and says, and even though all these things are happening to me on earth, these physical things, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that I will see God. And basically saying, God's going to redeem me, and I'm going to see God. And I think that has a lot, not all, but part of why Zophar was insulted.
Yeah.
Because basically he's saying it's apparent that your sins have condemned you. You're not going to. And so in a way, even though they're saying all this stuff, and Job says, I'm going to be redeemed, I think that's part of it too. No, I'm saying you're not going to be. It's apparent your sins have condemned you.
Yeah, I think that's a good catch on that. Yeah, I think that probably is a part of his response to that. Yeah, great catch, Joe. So in chapter 21, now here Job responds, and notice how he begins this, is listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your way of consolation. So console me by listening. So they came to comfort him, and they just failed miserably at that. So he says, now console me by just listening to what I have to say. Bear with me that I may speak. Therefore, after I have spoken, you may mock. As for me is my complaint to man, or why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished, and put your hand over your mouth. Even when I remember, I am disturbed, and horror takes hold of my flesh. Why do the wicked still live and continue on also become very powerful? So that's kind of his question, is who are they? You say this, but my question is I'm in this condition, and I was not wicked, but the wicked continue. You say all the wicked fall, and you say they end up like this. Well, who are the they? Who are the guys you've seen this happen to? Because I can name some guys who I have seen not fall. And that's really the point he's getting at here, is why do the wicked still live and continue on and become powerful? They just keep getting stronger. You say if they reach the sky, well, they're getting past that. Why is this happening if what you say is true? And how come the wicked wouldn't pick up on the way to get prosperous? And we're going to start circling around in some of this, some of Satan's assumptions, right? If you stopped paying him, he wouldn't be so good. Isn't that the question Job is asking? If the benefit was in being righteous, then why are they being wicked? Why are they becoming that way? So why do the verse 7, 21:7. Why do the wicked live, continue on also and become very powerful? Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and the rod of God is not on them. So here he's going on, he's like, it's not just the wicked, it's their descendants, and God's not striking them. And then he goes on to say all the ways that they're blessed. They're animals, reproduce animals. They have lots of children. They have peace, and they have joy in their home. Verse 13, they spend their days in prosperity, and suddenly they go down to Sheol. They say to God, depart from us. We do not even desire knowledge of your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what should we gain if we entreat him? So this is how the wicked live. He's like, they continue to be wicked. Nothing happens to them. God's not punishing them. Their children are doing well. Their descendants are carrying on. Their animals are being healthy. All these good things are happening. They have joy in their life, even though they curse God to his face. Even though they say, get away from here. What benefit it is to serve you? I'm going to do it my way. And so he gets to this point. He's like, this is happening, Zophar. This is happening. How do you explain that? How does your logic explain that? And so he asks that question and kind of points that out. And that's the right question. Right? This is not, Job's answer is not profound. This is actually, if in apologetics, when you're trying to defend who God is, that there is a God, and those sorts of things, these are the kind of questions that can't be answered. So for instance, I heard an interview with a guy, his name was John Lennox, and he wrote a book called Is Atheism Dead? And I would say, I want to get that book at some point. I looked at it, it's kind of expensive because it just came out right now, so I'll probably wait till I can pick it up on thrift books or digital or whatever. But his premise is that based on what we know in science and different things, discoveries we have made, it's not tenable to believe atheism anymore. So in the late 1800s, Nietzsche wrote a story called Is God Dead? And it was about this man who comes into town and they thought they killed God. And so but that was his question, is God dead? And from that philosophy, a lot of evil came into this world. And even some of the ideas of atheism and stuff, there is no God. And so we're going to try and explain another way. Well, now we've kind of come full circle where it's not tenable to believe what we've been taught in school. Some of those things just doesn't work. What was the first cause? If you say, okay, well, it was a Big Bang. Well, what caused that? You know where they go from there? Multiverses, all aliens, some other kind of intelligence. But what is your evidence for all of that? It's just as reasonable as, some of the Hindu beliefs, it's a whale on top of a turtle on top of a cow or something. It's just as reasonable as that. Well, what's the earth on? Well, we don't know. Probably a cow. From what I understand, it's the back of a turtle. It's like, well, what's the turtle on? Well, it's on a goose. What's the goose on? It's that kind of question, right? Is if that's true, why is that not true? If it's true, why doesn't it work that way? And that's kind of Job's question. If it's true, why doesn't it work that way? And it's the same thing, right? So we believe everything came from a primordial ooze. There was an electrical current through the right concoction of chemicals, started the first single-cell organism. What's the problem with that? Cells are a lot more complex than ooze. No, there has to be other things that happen before even cells are possible. How does that happen? Well, where did all the information in the DNA code come from? The only way we know information, it comes from a mind. There's information there, so what mind did it come from? You start asking questions like that. There's just no answer for it outside of God. And what's happening, and even in our day and age, is the same thing. Well, we believe this. Why do you believe that? What about these simple things that can't be explained? How do you address that? Well, we don't know yet. Science will tell us. Who's science? Science doesn't tell you anything. Science is a process. It's a method. It is not an intelligent thing. People do science, right? And so some people have to come up with it, but those people still have answers. And that's really what Job is doing here. He's saying, if that's the way it is, why doesn't it work that way? Why are there inconsistencies with your rules? And and so really in apologetics we do the same thing, but that's kind of what's going on here, is you just see that idea tied up in this, and Job is asking the right question, is why doesn't it work the way you say, if that's the way it works? Go ahead and read with me now, starting in verse 14. Actually, no, down in verse 16 and through 17. It says, behold, their prosperity is not in their hand. So they ask, who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what would we gain if we entreat him? Behold, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? Or let me start over on that. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out, or does their calamity fall on them? Does God apportion destruction in his anger? So there's his question. How often is the lamp of the wicked put out? Now you say it happens every time. Have you interviewed everyone? If someone makes a universal claim, it's pretty hard to make a universal claim. Here's what everyone thinks, right? If I said, I know for a fact there are no white rocks in the entire universe, in order to make that claim, what do I have to do? I have to go through the entire universe, right? If I assume, well, in this, I go to a beach where it's black sand and black rocks. Well, there's no white rocks on this beach, therefore there must not be any white rocks anywhere. Right? That's not really I've seen this happen to a couple of guys, therefore it must always happen that way. That's another one of those assumptions, where if you say, how do you know that? And that's what Job is asking. How do you know that? How often is the lamp of the wicked extinguished? How often is God's judgment brought down on them during their lifetime? How often does that happen? Well, I don't know. Does it happen every time? Well, if it doesn't happen every time, how do you explain the anomalies? Right? As you say, there's no white rocks. Well, I got a white rock right here. How do you explain that? Well, that must be the only one. No, I got this from a pilot. I knew a guy whose driveway was paved with white gravel. That probably isn't true. And that's what he's asking here is, how do you know? How often does it happen? How often have you seen it? It has to be universal for it to be God's command and law. 18 through 21, Job asks another question. He says, how do you say the wrath of God comes on wicked men when they live and die in prosperity? So that's his next question. How often does it come? Are they as straw before the wind and like chaff before the storm, which the storm carries away? You say, God stores away a man's iniquity for his sons. Let God repay him so that he may know. So here's a major point. He says, you say, well, see, it doesn't happen to him, but his children, they're going to have problems. So that's Job answering one of the questions. He's kind of maybe answering for them. You say, well, not everyone perishes. Well, yeah, that's true. It doesn't always happen in his generation, but it will happen to his kids if it doesn't happen to him. So Job's answer to that is, let God repay him so that he may know it. Let his own eyes see decay, and let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care for his household after him when the number of his months is cut off? You know who said this very same thing? Satan. In Job chapter 2 and verse, Job 2, I think it's verse 8 or 6. Let me see. It's verse 4. Job 2:4. Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. However, put forth his hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to his face. What does Job say? If the wicked man never experiences the curse of God, and he dies in prosperity and happiness, what does he care? He got a good life out of the deal, right? And so did Satan know something that was true? Yeah, it was true. It makes sense for wicked people. But what Satan's mistake was is he assumed every man would be that way, or Job would be that way. The same with Job's friends. They were doing the opposite, right? Since you got that, it must be that you were doing these other things, and so that's why it fell on you. But what Job's argument is if that is true, then it can't happen to their kids. Let it happen to them, because what do they care if their kids suffer or not? They had the good life, and their kids got to make their own road. And a wicked man doesn't much care about that. And even a righteous man maybe doesn't much care about that. Remember Josiah, when he was king? I think it was Josiah. God said, you're going to die before these things happen. He's like, all right, that's good. I'm fine with that. He was like, as long as it's not me, I'm good. So Josiah dies, and then the next king had to deal with the Babylon coming down on the nation. So it was either Josiah or Hezekiah, but one of them. Mike?
I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's like, wait a minute, why did this wicked guy, which, if you look at the kings of Israel, this is a prime example. Father was a total jerk, evil, wicked, whatever. Had a son that wasn't.
Yeah.
So where's this guy's plan? If, he's going to pass it on to, because even the wicked king was in it for quite a while.
Yeah. And it just, it doesn't line up with what God says. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is that it doesn't line up. And that's what Job is going to say next is actually the right answer. In 22 through 26, he says, there's no discernible pattern to life for the good and the bad. That's really his next argument. There's just no discernible pattern. Here's how he says it. Can anyone teach God knowledge in that he judges those on high? One dies in his full strength, but wholly at ease and satisfied. His sides are filled with fat, and the marrow of his bone is moist. While another dies with a bitter soul, not even tasting anything good. Together they lie down in the dust, and worms cover them. Behold, I know your thoughts and the plans by which you would wrong me. For you say, where is the house of the nobleman? Where is the tent, the dwelling places of the wicked? Have you not asked wayfaring men? So here in 26, the point that Job makes is, there are some people who live in prosperity. And later on what he'll say is, some evil men live in prosperity and some good men live in prosperity. And then he says, some evil men live in poverty, and some righteous men live in poverty. And they struggle. They both struggle. And then everybody dies and is eaten by worms. And so there is no discernible pattern. And then he answers them saying, well, maybe you just don't. And then he asks them the question, don't you know where wicked men live? And then and his answer, the way he asks it is, if you go into a town and you ask somebody, won't they be able to tell you where the most powerful man in the town lives? When you see traveling men, a lot of times it would be more powerful men who travel, businessmen, that sort of a thing, influential people. And you see them traveling, you can identify rich men. You guys know how to do this. And he's like, so they're out there and they're prospering. And he's like, don't you have enough wisdom to discern where the powerful men live and just do an examination of that? So verse 28, he says, for you say, where is the house of the nobleman, and where is the tent, the dwelling place of the wicked? Have you not asked wayfaring men, and do you not recognize their witness? Don't you know how to recognize them, is basically what he asks. Verse 30, for the wicked is reserved for the day of calamity. They will be led forth in the day of fury. Who will confront him with his actions, and who will repay him what he has done? While he is carried to the grave, men will keep watch over his tomb. The clods of the valley will gently cover him. Moreover, all men will follow after him, while countless ones go before him. How then will you vainly comfort me, for your answers remain full of falsehood? And so here's he saying, here's what you say, but you know where to find wicked men, and you could go find them if you wanted to. And those wicked men are going to prosper, and when they do something wrong, no one's going to come and stand up to them or tell them to their face. And here's the idea, if you have someone who's a lord who has maybe a militia and that sort of a thing, and then you have all the kind of poorer peasants, and there's, if you think of like a lord who has a land, and then he's got the peasants on his land that work for him, and he does something wrong, which one of those peasants are going to go correct him? No, they're just going to keep their mouth shut. And then when he dies, those same people that he was abusing, some of them will go guard his tomb and make sure that he's okay, that his dead body's okay. And he says the clods of the earth are going to gently cover him. It's not like it's going to be some violent death or anything. And at the end of all that, he's no different than countless men who came before him and countless men who will come after him. And the point is, if the way of the wicked is so bad and always comes around on them, then why are all these other things what we observe? And then he gives just a blunt answer, kind of the kind of smack across the face, if you will. How then will you vainly comfort me, for your answers remain full of falsehoods? You're easily disproven. What you're saying is clearly not true. You don't even know what you're talking about. That's kind of the answer that Job gives here. And Zophar doesn't answer again. He pretty much is done with that. But you just see that's not the way it is. You're claiming it, but that's not the way it is. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, so Eliphaz, actually, there's a lot of text on the screen, but I find this interesting. This was a pretty good summary as we're kind of getting into these last round of arguments. It says, this is from Bible Knowledge Commentary. I like this one. They're pretty concise in what they say. Have a lot of insights on fact things, but I thought this was a good observation. In the cycle of Job's visit, in cycle 1, Job's visitors implied that he was a sinner and appealed to him to repent. In the second foray, they insinuated that he was guilty and stressed the terrible fate of the wicked, but voiced no challenge for repentance. In the third verbal battle, they attacked him by accusing him of specific sins, and not only Eliphaz again, and only Eliphaz again gave a call for Job to turn back to God. Job stood his ground in response during these 3 rounds of attacks. He denied A, the premise of their implication, B, the assertion that he was the wicked always suffer, and C, that he himself was a deliberate transgressor. So you kind of see, here's what they did. They started calling him to repentance. Then they shifted to judgmentalism, just here's what you are. And then they shifted to here's why I think you are what you are. All of it false. I mean, there's truth in it. There are some things that would be true for people who sin. Even with Eliphaz, he's going to call Job as a sinner to repentance, and what he says is very convincing in that. But the problem is Job's not a sinner. He skipped the step of actually knowing something wrong. But he does throw out some accusations, so at least finally they're getting down to something that can be talked about. But why did they come? To comfort. And Job says, the only comfort I'm going to get out of you is if you don't interrupt me while I'm speaking. Like that's how he started his life. Just keep your mouth shut while I'm speaking, and I'll consider that comfort, because you're pretty much lousy. And he calls them lousy physicians, and really really has not benefited the way he hoped from their visit to him. Yet he still continues talking with them. So here we see Eliphaz and his final statement, and basically I thought this was a pretty good representation of what Eliphaz tries to do.
Great picture. Great picture.
Yeah, as we read it too, you'll say, oh yeah, that's right. He looks like he's really wanting to throw the book at Job here. So in 22, 1 through 4, then Eliphaz the Temanite responded, can a vigorous man be of use to God, or a wise man useful to himself? Is there any pleasure to the Almighty if you are righteous, or profit if you make your ways perfect? Is it because of your reverence that he reproves you, that he enters into judgment against you? Here's his question, and I think this is actually a good response, even though it's wrong. So Job, do you suppose all this is happening to you because you're so righteous? Like, that's kind of how he turns it around. Do you suppose this is happening to you because you're righteous? I mean, are we so far out of the ballpark on this one? Because that would be what you have to be saying. What's the true answer to that question? Yes. Isn't it funny how he asked Job, in order to prove him wrong, is this happening because you're righteous? And it turns out, well, that's the answer. Yeah, it happens because it is happening because he's righteous. So I just thought that was kind of a interesting beginning to his speech. He hits really close to the truth on accident. That's where that we say even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. That's what's going on here. 5 through 11. Here's where Eliphaz starts naming names, if you will. Is not your wickedness great, and your iniquities without end? For you have taken pledges of your brothers without cause, and stripped men naked. So here you have this idea. So if someone's going to take a pledge, they'd say, okay, you keep my coat, and then when I'm finished with your tool, I'll return the tool and you return the coat to me. Or if you get a loan or whatever, that sort of a thing. There's all sorts of regulations in the law about taking pledges. If you take a poor man's coat, you need to return it to him by the end of the day so he's not sleeping in the cold. So there is precedent, and we can have knowledge of ancient culture and what the right thing is to do from the ancient law, because this isn't too far from the law of Moses, this time period. And they thought it was wrong to take someone's coat and make them freeze overnight as you keep their coat for surety. And so that's what they're accusing Job of, though. And so this would actually be a violation of Moses' law, but it's also just a violation of ethical treatment of people. You're going to take the only valuable thing they have, and it's a necessary thing, and you're just going to keep it and sell it in order to gain a profit. So that's what they're accusing Job of, is unethical treatment of his brethren. So that's verse 6. Verse 7. To the weary you have given no water to drink, and from the hungry you have withheld bread. Now here is something that Jesus talks about. Right? I was hungry and you didn't give me food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. Well, when were you hungry? When you were thirsty? Because you didn't do it to my brethren. And now here is the accusation they're making against Job. When people are thirsty, you don't give them water. When people are hungry, you don't feed them. You are a cold-hearted man, Job. And so that's their second accusation. 8. Does the earth belong? But the earth belongs to the mighty man, and the honorable man dwells in it. So here's, he begins talking about strength, where he's saying, the mighty man conquers and possesses. The honorable man dwells within that, but he's not going to have the same power. Now, what was Job? Did he possess things, or did he dwell within things? He had possession. He was a man of possessions. So here's the third accusation, and this comes from the Eastern culture, especially ancient Eastern culture. They viewed economics as a zero-sum thing. So let's say there's 100 pieces of wealth, and if I have 90 of them, that's because I took them from people who could have them and only left 10 for everyone else. And so just that idea of, if you're accumulating for yourself, you're accumulating at the expense of other people. And that probably still is a common Eastern view of economics and wealth. And so they used to think it was an evil thing to accumulate a lot of wealth because they assumed you did it at the expense of other people. And I think that's the assumption here against Job. And a lot of these accusations kind of come back to, you're keeping for yourself what other people need. And that's kind of the tone of a lot of this. So, the earth belongs to the mighty man, and the honorable man dwells in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of orphans have been crushed. I just find how many New Testament parallels is in this. James chapter 1, I think verse 26 or 27, it says, true and undefiled religion is this, is to visit widows and orphans in the time of their need, something to that effect. But basically to supply the needs of the widows and orphans. That's what true religion is it acts without concern for self in order to benefit others. And that's the accusation against Job. You denied widows and orphans what they needed, and they were crushed. 10. Therefore snares surround you, and sudden dread terrifies you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and an abundance of water covers you. Is not God in the height of heaven? Look also at the distant stars, how high they are. You say, what does God know? Can he judge through thick darkness? Clouds are a hiding place for him so that he cannot see, and he walks on the vault of the heaven. Will you keep to the ancient path which wicked men have trod, who were snatched away before their time, whose foundations were washed away by a river? They said to God, depart from us, and what can the Almighty do for them? Yet he filled their houses with good things. The evil man filled his houses with good things, but the counsel of the wicked is... Yet he filled their houses with good things, but the counsel of the wicked is far from me. The righteous see and are glad, and the innocent mock them, saying, truly our adversaries are cut off, and their abundance the fire has consumed. So here he makes accusations against Job. I find it interesting how he starts talking about you're underwater, just like the wicked men of prior. They trod an ancient path, and their houses were swept away with the river too. Maybe a reference to the flood and what happened to all the wicked men who existed before the flood. Seems like there could be a reference to that sort of a thing. But either way, the accusation is, Job, your house is wicked. Another thing they said is you drink iniquity, just like water. Just all those kind of accusations. And so that's his accusation against Job. And he's saying, Righteous men, when they see the house of the wicked consumed, they appreciate it. Truly our adversaries are cut off, and their abundance the fire has consumed. So in 21, he makes his appeal to Job now. But there's another interesting thing about what Eliphaz says here, is he starts honoring God and who he is. Do you really think you're going to hide from God? Do you think the clouds prevent him from seeing what you're doing? If you go out and sin on a cloudy day, do you think that he's not going to notice what's happening down underneath the clouds? Job, do you really think you're going to hide from him in that way? And so he's just saying is, you will be exposed. And maybe I am exposing you, but God also knows if I know. 21, yield now and be at peace with him. Thereby goodwill will come to you. Please receive instruction from his mouth and establish his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored. If you remove unrighteousness far from your tent, place your gold in the dust and the gold of Ophir among the stones of the brooks, then the Almighty will be your gold, and choice silver to you. Then you will delight in the Almighty and lift up your face to God. You will pray to him, and he will hear you, and you will pay your vows. You will also decree a thing, and it will be established for you, and light will shine on your ways. When you are cast down, you will speak with confidence, and the humble person he will save. He will deliver one who is not innocent, and he will be delivered through the cleanness of your hands. So here's just his appeal, which, if a man is guilty, this is what you say to him. And I think this is a good model. I think Eliphaz does a good job in calling a guilty man to repentance. He's like, look, even if you're in, I like this, says, he will deliver one who is not innocent, but he will be delivered through the cleanness of his hands. Even if you're not innocent, wash your hands, clean them up, get rid of the evil things, go after his word. I thought that was an interesting element of this, is he says, you will delight in the Almighty. Oh, where does it say that? Anyway, I thought I had it highlighted. Oh yeah, 22 is what I was looking for. Please receive instruction from his mouth and establish his words in your heart. So a lot of this is really good advice. But the problem is the accusations are false. So, and so you really see Eliphaz is more wise, and a lot of what he says I actually agree with, but not in the context in which he's saying it. And that's an important, that's the thing to keep in mind about this. Bruce?
Yeah, in the early on in chapter 1, when God is talking to Satan, he tells Satan that Job is a blameless man. You know, and being blameless is a qualification for serving as an elder in the church today. Mm-hmm. And so what these accusations that these guys are leveling against Job, none of which are true. Being a blameless man doesn't mean that you're not going to be accused of things. It means that you're not guilty, you're not held blameful for the things that you're accused of. So there's a difference between being blamed for something and having accusations and being found blameless before God.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's a great point. Is you will be accused, and I think above reproach is another one of those terms. And it's like that means the accusations don't stick because your character has never demonstrated that as a possibility. And so I think that's a great point there. Is you may, and also the other thing Job argues is, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I have a relationship with God. I try to do the right things, and I really desire to know and to approach God and to be corrected by Him and to be right before Him. I've always desired that. I've always lived that way. So this is happening to me, and it's not right. Even if I'm not perfect, this is not right because I live right. Larry?
I was going to say, it seems like that Job's friends are totally relying on what maybe we would think of as circumstance.
Yeah.
No hard evidence, but you look at all of these things that have happened to you, Job, you must be doing something. The circumstances that you're in are dictating that you're doing something wrong. And even in our society now, we're willing to make a lot of definitive statements about somebody based on the circumstances surrounding them. Whatever difficulty they might be having. So I don't know if I was just thinking that this could be a good reason for us to really be careful about giving so much weight to circumstances.
Yeah, and having, and at least knowing something. And this is why, in God's standard, it's confirmed by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. So someone saw it, or a couple of people saw it, and they can attest to it as being true. The reason why that's an important standard is because it gets away from this accusation. And even though I believe his friends are, what they're doing, they're sincerely wrong. I think they really want what's best for Job, but they're doing it the wrong way. And maybe a little dishonest, or maybe not overtly dishonest, but at least not challenging what they're stating. They're not letting it be challenged, not willing to challenge it. But we can't be that. We need to be honest. We need to make sure that we do challenge what we state as true. The Bereans were noble-minded, but it was because they listened and then they examined. And they held to what was true. And so many times in the scripture it says, examine all things, hold to that which is true. Test the spirits to see whether or not they're from God. There's all these things. We have a responsibility towards the truth and to being truth tellers. And I think that's an important aspect to being a Christian, is we need to rise above the reasoning of man and take on the wisdom of God. That's what the Proverbs is all about, right? Is how do you be wise? How do you be discerning? How do you, like Larry said, is how do you avoid the problem of accusing due to circumstantial things instead of actual knowledge? We need to be careful about that. So chapter 23, Job answers Eliphaz, but he answers him, and it's actually kind of an he praises God too. And maybe I can't remember if it's this one or the next one, but he even goes beyond the praise of Eliphaz. I can't recall if it's this one or if it's the next time he speaks, but he praises God too. Here's what he says, 1 through 10. He says, even today my complaint, Job replied, even today my complaint is rebellion. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come to his seat. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. Then I would learn the words which he would answer and perceive what he would say to me. Notice what Job says. And I think this is really a critical thing. He wants to make his case to God. Like, he thinks that's important. But what he also says is, but I want to hear his correction. I want to find him and address him so he can fix, because I'm groaning to him and he doesn't hear me. But what I want is God to hear me. I want to approach him. It's kind of an interesting thing. Here's Job's desire. He just feels lost in the world. His friend isn't answering him. And he wants to know that he's being heard by his friend, God. The person that he honors and loves and wants to know and honor. In Hebrews 4:16, it says, we have, through the blood of Jesus Christ, confident access to the throne of God. What Job just wished he had, we have. And we know when we approach the throne of God, we can receive mercy in the time of need. And as we are going through hardship, even if it was as severe as Job's, he doesn't know, but we know God is by our side. God is going to carry us through. He's not going to let anything happen that's beyond our ability to stand up to. And he will refine us, but he's also going to, he is also our help. And this is true for Job. He just didn't know about it. And I think this is a really powerful thing, is sometimes you just see what Job really wants, we have. And sometimes maybe we have in neglect a little bit because we're so comfortable with it. But too bad Job didn't know what we knew. He would have had a lot more peace during this, but he went through this anyway. Even despite that, faith was enough. And so we're blessed in all the advantages we have in our faith, even if we have to go through what he went through. I saw a hand, Larry. And then Mike.
I guess I was going to say that Job his answer. And to me, it's all about time. We have that access that you described, and sometimes we want our answers right now. We want to be done with our suffering right now too. We want
Yeah.
to be done with our health problems right now too. But we have, I think, a great thing that we can learn from this is God's going to answer us in His time, not necessarily.
Yeah. And sometimes the answer is, do you trust me? And that's the answer that Job gets is, are you willing to trust me? And God never explains himself. He just says, are you willing to trust me? And Job has to say, yeah, I am. I'm willing to trust you. I think you're wise enough for me to depend on your judgment. So, yeah, but we have to do the same thing. And yeah. But we face the same challenges as Job. We just have a way to find out more. And sometimes you got to go through the hard time to start looking for that. Verse 6, he says, would he contend with me by the greatness of his power? No, surely he would pay attention to me. This is just a great little verse. Now you see another thing is, if I came and see God, would he stand over me and intimidate me? No, he wouldn't. He would listen to me. He would pay attention to me. And just kind of a side note, another parallel, there, like particularly with the woman who had the hemorrhage, and Jesus is in this crowd, this woman comes up and touches the hem of his garment. He's like, power went out from me. Who touched me? Everybody touched you. No. But this woman here, who snuck up and touched the hem of his garment, he stopped, everyone was around him, and he took time to listen to her story. And it reveals 12 years, she went to all these doctors, spent all her money. All that's details that Jesus sat and listened to. So she could tell her story to him, and he could know, like he already knew, but he listened to her. And what Job assumed about God, Jesus confirmed through his demonstration of who God is. And I just think that's kind of an interesting thing where Job, but you see a shift. Before, he thought God is is being hard with me. And now you see him saying, no, God would listen. Where before he would say, I don't know if God would listen. I don't know if God is just. Where now he's seen, no, God is just. He would listen. 8 and 9, it says, behold, I go forward, but he is not there. Backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he acts on the left, I cannot behold him. He turns to the right, I cannot see him. But he knows the way I take. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. I just find this another very fascinating turn to Job's attitude. I have no idea what God is doing or what he's like. I can't tell. I have so limited information. But I know he knows me. I can't see him, but he can see me. And I just thought this is kind of an interesting thing because in John 1:18 it says, no one has seen God at any time, but the only begotten who's in the bosom of the Father, he has explained him. And I think that's what a blessing it is that Jesus came here to show us what God does. So we don't have to guess like Job, I can't see him. We can look at Jesus and know what God does. And that's what Job says is, but when he tests me, when I go to court, when he tries me, he's going to question me, he's going to examine me, and that's going to purify me. Whatever it is will be purged away. And then, but look what he says. My foot has held fast to his path. I have kept his way and not turned aside. I have not departed from the command of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. But he is unique, and who can turn him? And what his soul desires, that he does. For he performs what is appointed for me, and many such decrees are with him. Therefore I would be dismayed at his presence when I consider I am terrified of him. It is God who has made my heart faint, and the Almighty who has dismayed me. But I am not silenced by the darkness, nor deep gloom which covers me. Why are times not stored up by the Almighty, and why do these who know him not see his days? So here, Job he changes his argument a little bit. But what he says is, when he examines me, when he tries me, I'm going to be purified like gold. Because I know I have tried to keep everything I know about him. So I'm confident to stand and attest to that. And he'll know. He'll know. In 24:1, Job addresses Zophar's argument and Eliphaz's argument in a different way, because he says God's timeline for judgment is unknown. And so that's how he starts. Nobody knows what God is doing. He don't say he's unjust. He just doesn't post a calendar for us so we can look and see this is when judgment's going to happen. And that's really what this whole chapter says, is God is going to bring justice. We just don't know what it's going to be like when it's going to happen. I did not get where I wanted to go. I have to stop right here. We're past time already. So we'll just go ahead and pick up in 24 next week. And that actually, I wanted to get done with the discourses, but actually works better because I really didn't want to start in 26 because that's going to just carry on all the way through. It's like 26 through 31 or something, and I wanted to keep it together. So we'll try and keep that stuff together next week. Any thoughts or comments before we close up?
One of the things I didn't get to in my sermon, because I ran out of time, was I was going to make a comment that, at the end of verse 19, when Job, I guess, remembered that his Redeemer this, I feel like he had to have captured the thought that the things that my buddies are telling me are not true. I can still trust God. I don't know why this is happening, but I do know that that would have been a great point for me to get out.
Yeah. Well, even that's a great point, and I think it's a great application, because even at the end of this chapter here, he says, I'm not silenced by the darkness, nor the deep gloom which covers me. Before, he was lost in it, but now it's like he has a bearing. But it's that thought. I know my Redeemer lives. I know that. And so, based on that, I will be able to move forward. And yeah, it's like what you said. It changed. You really see a change in Job's disposition after that point. So, yeah, great point. Joe?
Yeah, I just said at the beginning here, the change that's taken place in Job and his understanding. You see it. Back in 21:22, when he says, "Can anyone teach God knowledge?" and then he judges those on high. It don't make sense to me. He's saying to these people who are coming, or whatever you want to call it, basically saying to them, you can't teach God how to judge people. You know what I'm saying? And basically that's what they're trying to do. They're saying this is how God judges people, not by what we're saying. And then this, where you just read here in 20, I don't know God's ways, but I know when I stand before God, I'm going to count my soul. Not you, Judge. God.
Yeah.
It's just, so his understanding is just getting more and more, you can see it.
Yeah, and also, it doesn't matter how wise we are. God is above all that. And then I think in chapter 26, this is where he starts he starts out by saying, he describes and really 26 is a pretty profound chapter because it has some things that you almost get a display of Job's education, because there's some things he knows that are not easy to know. And then he says, he's explaining that all the things God does, and this is just the fringe of his power. And he's talking about the moon, the stars, and all that he does with his mighty works. And he's like, that's just the fringe of his power. And so you just see Job really turn to recognizing, God is, he knows, he's better, he's smarter. We need to honor him. And really that's where he turns from there. Any other thoughts on Mike?
I think what we've seen Job go through is a process. Same process that sometimes that we go through whenever we go through a really big event, a big negative event in our life. First, the irrational stuff happens. And that's, as he said, just let me talk. I'm in pain. But then, for lack of better terms, it's like he hits bottom and realizes, okay, God is always there. He's always been there. He will get me back. Or he will, And now he's basically saying, regardless of what I think, whatever God's answer, when it comes, I'll accept it. It'll be the right answer. And and he just, it's just, to me, it's that amount of faith that I wish I could.
Yeah.
Because I ain't there yet, but it's amazing, I think. Because this is where we're actually seeing it work inside Job.
Yeah, and really you're starting to see, before you were seeing the turmoil of Job's situation, but here you're starting to see the quality of his character. So, yeah, no, this is a really, really neat thing. So let's go ahead and close up with a word of prayer.